Sustainability Group in the Center for Ecology and Hydrology. He focuses his research on understanding catchment and climate drivers of water quality using long-term and large-scale data sets. He has expertise in the monitoring and assessment of the ecological health of lakes and reservoirs and how water quality impacts the goods and services fresh water provides. He is interested in combining new approaches using low-cost sensors, satellite Earth observation, and citizen science to strengthen current freshwater monitoring and management decisions. So I welcome Laurence to the dais, and we'll start now. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyanka. Well, thanks very much for inviting me to give a seminar, and thanks for turning up to listen. It's a real pleasure to come to ATREE. We've been talking, Priyanka, Veena, and Durba for the last year or so about various project ideas, so it's nice now to come along and actually see the place. So I'm from the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and I'm actually at our Edinburgh office in Scotland. I also have an honorary position at the University of Stirling, so I collaborate a lot with my research with the University of Stirling, and I will be presenting some of that work as well. So I'm going to just talk about four things. Firstly, I'm going to say a little bit about CEH, Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, give you a bit of background to that. I'll then talk about the science in our group. This is our main field site on a nice summer's day in Scotland, when we have to wear woolly hats. And then thirdly, I'm going to talk about our new project called Sunrise, which is really to do with collaborating with ATREE and others up in northern India at IIT Roorkee and NIH Roorkee on restoration of village ponds. And then finally, I'm going to talk a bit about innovation in monitoring, and particularly cover satellites and citizen science and smartphones and that sort of thing. Okay, so four sort of strands. Just to start, so CEH is a government research centre. We're one of four main research centres on the environment, with the National Oceanography Centre, British Geological Survey and the British Antarctic Survey are our sister organisations. And we all come under what's called the Natural Environment Research Council. And that is part of the Department of Business, Energy and Environment. They've changed their name, Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And that's where all research and innovation comes under. And so even the UK university funding all comes through this department. But we are a government department for the natural environment in particular. And there are other research centres for economic and social sciences, arts and humanities, engineering and physical sciences. And these are now all beginning to be brought together under one banner, this UK Research and Innovation, a new thing that actually starts on the 1st of April. And there should, in theory, be more scope for closer collaboration between research, different disciplines of research, once that happens. So CEH is actually comprised of four sites. As I said, I'm up here in Scotland in Edinburgh. Our headquarters is down in Wallingford here, quite near London. We've got a site in Wales, in North Wales, and another site in Lancaster. And it's quite a large organisation. We've got about 325 staff, scientist staff, another 75 or so non-scientific staff. And we've got about 100 PhD students. So we're a research active organisation. And those PhD students, like ATREE, I think, are in collaboration with UK universities or other universities elsewhere as well. But we are the leading UK sort of research centre for freshwater science in terms of funding we get. And we have particular sort of remit, or what's called national capability, to keep up national capability for long-term science and large-scale science. So long-term monitoring of the natural environment and large-scale UK-wide monitoring. And I put this up just to give you a bit of structure again, because there may be some faces that you know. So I don't know if you know Mark Bailey and Alan Jenkins, whether they've ever visited ATREE. But certainly Gwyn Rees, who heads our water resources section, is working with Veena on a project here with the Indian Institute of Science at Bangalore as well, called Upscape. It's about local to catchment scale water resource management in the Calvary Basin. Harry Dixon, who leads the Water Resource Systems Group, he also coordinates the India-UK Water Centre, which again, some of you may have come across, but you can be part of and hear about potential collaborative opportunities, exchange visits between UK and India. So it's a good source of funding for developing exchanges and proposals. And so I run one of 5 of the sort of groups under Gwyn, which is a sort of focus on restoration and sustainability of freshwaters. We've got other science areas as well, particularly on the biodiversity side. And some of you may be working with Beth Peirce, who runs a sort of disease ecology group, and Sarah Berth, who's also involved in that disease work. So just a bit more about our group. So as I said, we sort of really focus on quite applied aspects of our sciences, which is the science needed to underpin restoration and management and sustainability of freshwaters. There's 9 staff we have and 5 PhD students, so it's not too big a group. But we cover sort of lake and river ecology and sort of landscape catchment work as well, landscape connectivity, catchment nutrient budgets and that sort of stuff. We're particularly sort of known for our work on ecological assessment and ecosystem service assessments of freshwaters, carbon and nutrient processing, river restoration work, river plants and flooding, and then my expertise is in harmful algal blooms in lakes. But we do some sort of fundamental science as well, particularly on ecological resilience and regime shifts, tipping points, sort of understanding how multiple stressors interact and how you can analyze them using monitoring data versus experimental data, the differences there in categorizing interactions between stressors. And then particularly we've got a large project at the moment looking at connectivity, which we call hydroscape rather than landscape, because it's looking at connectivity between lakes and rivers and how that affects species and biodiversity responses to stress. I'm not going to show you too much about most of these, just I think 1 or 2. So our main field site for work is at Loch Leven, which is just a bit north of Edinburgh. It's about 15 kilometres squared. It's one of Scotland's largest lakes. So loch is just the Scottish word for lake there, so if any of you wondered. But it's one of the sort of international sort of long-term ecological research platforms. And we basically run it, but we collaborate with quite a large number of universities who want to do their research on the site, and with the Scottish Government and the James Hutton Institute, which is one of the Scottish Government's research centres, who do a lot of catchment work on the site as well. Our group particularly run and set up the UK Lakes portal, and I'm going to say a bit more about that. That just shows where we are in the UK. And you can just see from the blue dots on the map that Scotland actually has a lot more blue dots than England and Wales, and we hold about 90% of the UK's water in Scotland in terms of lake volumes and also in terms of river discharge as well. So it's a much wetter environment. When you visit, if you visit, you'll see that it's generally a wetter climate. Personally, I work a lot at the European scale, working on data sets from across Europe, about 700 to 1,500 lakes, depending on what we're looking at. And that's a lot of work funded by the European Commission. And there's a really nice website that synthesizes a lot of projects from European funded projects that are focused on freshwaters. And that's been running for, I think, about 10 years now. So lots of results from different projects come into that with tools for freshwater management and freshwater biodiversity tools as well. And then internationally, our group work in sort of 3 main countries. Kenya, we're working in Lake Victoria, China, Lake Erhai mainly, and here, as I've mentioned, in India, and basically at 2 sites. One in, we're hoping to start working with ATREE here in Bangalore, and with NIH and IIT Roorkee, our main collaborators, a bit with IIT Kanpur as well. So just a bit more about Lochleven, our long-term platform. As I said, it's been going for quite a while, 50 years we've been monitoring it for. So it's about similar age to me, from 1968 onwards. And then we've been going there weekly to fortnightly. We currently go fortnightly. So it is a huge data set. And we cover physics, chemistry, particularly nutrient chemistry. We do phytoplankton and zooplankton fortnightly. And then we do macrophytes every year, or 2 or 3 years sometimes. Invertebrates 3 times a year. Fish, we have daily fish catch data actually, because it's from a fishery. We have annual surveys as well. And birds, there's monthly wetland bird counts. So we cover the full sort of spectrum of the food web. Some of these are collected by other organisations, actually the fish and birds, but we do an annual fish survey as well. We also do decadal nutrient loading surveys to look at how the land use change affects nutrient loading changes. We actually have fishing data going back over 100 years, so daily data of fish catches for over 100 years. And we have visitor data from about 2010. So now we're beginning to get a bit more use data and social and economic data to go alongside our environmental data to try and quantify the value of biodiversity and quality of the environment to ecosystem services, and understand that relationship between biodiversity and ecosystem services a bit more. It's a really important site for fisheries, but it's a recreational fishery, so different from here. So people fly fishing for trout, and mostly they put those fish back, but they are allowed to keep some of the smaller fish. Well, not the really small fish, but an intermediate size. And occasionally, if this is a record-breaking fish from the site, then I think that one was allowed to be kept for posterity. It's also a Ramsar site, a special scientific interest for birds. So particularly important for migratory duck and geese, but also summer breeding species as well. And you can't see very well, but this is the total phosphorus concentrations from 1968 onwards. And certainly in the 70s and the 90s, it was particularly eutrophic, with chlorophyll levels above 100 micrograms per litre, so hypertrophic, not eutrophic. And we have dense cyanobacteria blooms for large parts of the year. And you can see we started, the site gets sewage effluent from 3 sewage works from 3 towns, smallish towns, but from about probably 50,000 to 100,000 people effluent. And that didn't used to be treated, but now it all gets treated for tertiary treatment for phosphorus stripping. And you can see that all happened around the sort of early 1990s, but it's taken about 20 years for actually the lake to recover because of all the nutrients stored in the sediments. But we are now beginning to see a sort of real sustained recovery. Alongside the nutrients going down, we've got macrophytes growing much more to much deeper levels in the lake, and those are helping to trap the nutrients in the sediments and stop this internal loading. So the Lakes Portal, this was actually a collaboration with University College London, where I used to be at the very start of this project. And it's funded by conservation agencies originally to sort of get a picture of the biodiversity resource in freshwaters in the UK. It's derived from mapped data at sort of 1 to 50,000 level. And then we've got used our catchment data, our river network data, to map the catchments. And we also are responsible for land cover data in the UK from satellite data. And that's all incorporated into the Lakes Portal with certain tools for assessing risks from nutrient pollution and acid deposition as well, acid rain. So it's a public portal that anyone can access. Behind it is a database that, again, we do provide the database to people for research purposes. And you can see here, the bulk of, or half of the water bodies are less than half a hectare in size, so half a football pitch in size or so. And that many of these sites here, actually, it's a bit uncertain, the database, whether we've captured that many of them. But once we get into these levels, the sort of 15,000 to 20-odd thousand of sites, we're pretty confident we've caught most of those. And then all these ones, the sort of 14,000 or so that are over 1 hectare in size, we have catchment data. We have modelled depth data, modelled volume data as well. So just an example from the portal. So each lake has a home page with basic statistics on it, and then there are a number of tabs to get further information on chemistry, land cover, biology information. So this is an example of the land cover data in the catchment of Loch Lomond. This is one of the famous lakes up in Scotland, and you can see that's dominated by acid grassland in the catchment, and open dwarf shrub heath. It's quite an upland, low population density system, so not so much a lowland system. And then the third, this is just another example of the data that you can, this is the biodiversity data. So you can, in CH, we actually run what's called the Biological Records Centre for the UK, which is all records coming in from specialist societies or citizen recorder schemes for birds or dragonflies or whatever. And so you can, we've linked our lakes database to that, so you can query what biodiversity data has been recorded around your lake, and you can then filter it for whether you want fish data, bird data, whatever. I'd say the more detailed freshwater biodiversity data is very poor in these Biological Records Centre, but if you ask for things like fish or birds, there's generally good data because we've got lots of citizen recorders, lots of fishermen or bird watchers who submit records. And this just shows the distribution of roach, a fish species in Scotland. Sometimes some of the data is 10-kilometre resolution, but you can see that some records have got a finer resolution, so 10-metre or 1-kilometre resolution, and that's sort of visible in the map. You can see from there. And this is all public, so and you can download the data as well if you want to use it. And that's not just for research, it's for anyone. So that's just a bit about the Lakes portal. Just a very little bit about ecological assessment, what we do. So I was very involved with the new European legislation for water framework directive, where we had to come up with, they changed the whole way we measured the quality of freshwaters from a sort of more chemical quality, things like oxygen and ammonia concentrations, to biological quality. And we had to come up with a scale of ecological status of a measure from bad to high status, which was a quantified measure in terms of its deviation from a baseline sort of undisturbed state. So we had to first define what undisturbed state meant for each water body or type of water body, and then work out how we quantify our biology to give us a measure of where we are on that status level. That was fairly tricky. We also had to sort of define uncertainty in our classification, so quantify that uncertainty due to different analysts sampling or just due to spatial variability. And then the difficulty was that we had to make sure our thresholds between high and good and moderate status were the same across Europe. So that in UK, our good moderate boundary was the same as Germany or France or Norway. And that was the really tricky bit of the assessment schemes. So your value of chlorophyll A, for example, in this wouldn't necessarily be the same because your baseline might be different. So a lowland lake would have a very different baseline to a Himalayan lake, where you wouldn't expect, it hasn't got that natural minerals in the catchment coming in. And so, but a Himalayan lake maybe compared to an alpine lake to make sure that they had comparable thresholds. And there's a couple of papers there you can read about. I was particularly responsible for the phytoplankton assessment needs. Ours was slightly different than most in that we defined this boundary on almost an ecosystem service level boundary. So there are some World Health Organization thresholds for cyanobacteria, and we used that partly as a way for defining the difference between good and moderate. So it took an ecosystem service approach. And then on to Sunrise. Sunrise, this new project, sustainable use of natural resources to improve human health and support economic development. So this one's really, it's funded by our sort of overseas development department rather than our science or research department. So its aim is not purely to do sort of scientific research, but more to have impact with that work. So improve people's lives, basically. 3-year project that started last year, and so we've got just over 2 years or so to still work on it. And particularly India's a focus of the work. So as I said, it's India, China, Kenya, and a bit in Indonesia as well. Just to give you an overview, there's 3 sort of areas in the project. One is on hydroclimatic services, and that's particularly on flood and drought forecasting and water resource availability that WINS leads. So I'm involved in particularly the second main task, which is restoration of degraded environments, and the one on enhancing freshwaters. And Beth and Sarah, who are working here on the forest disease, are involved in this one, vector-borne pathogens, but they've also got another grant working with ATREE on that topic. And then a third one is on sort of more integrated assessment, particularly sort of natural capital assessment and ecosystem services, with quite a lot of focus on sustainable agriculture. And so the work we're trying to establish in India is on restoring lakes and ponds. We've got a bit of work going on in the River Ganga as well, the Upper Ganga. But the work I'm particularly trying to take forward is work on village ponds, well, rural ponds and also urban ponds. So with ATREE here, I think we're probably going to focus more on the urban tank lake systems around Bangalore. And these are a couple of sites up north, and these photos from last week actually, in Uttarakhand province near Carvalho. And you can see this is one pond that has a constructed wetland that's just establishing here, but just the screening of the effluent and the clearing of the vegetation from that pond has really had an impact already. And this is a control pond of the village next door, and you can see the sort of state of that without any management, basically. I think what's important, so what I'm saying is quite important. We still, when you're trying to have an impact and measure the success of some of these management measures, I think it's always still very good to have a scientific underpinning to that and think about how you are going to get strong evidence. And that's why we're very keen to have control systems that we compare our treatment systems to, and ideally have look at before and after the treatment systems going as well. We can really try and pin it down to that particular treatment being the reason for the improvement or not. Okay. So, it may be that these systems won't work. We're struggling to get their wetlands established actually here. But so it may be that never really works, but at least we've got the system to really assess whether something's happening or not. And that's why we think that the more paired systems, that down here in Bangalore, we have a paired lake system, Bangalore, and I've forgotten the other name. There's going to be the other one. Okay, great. And then sort of another theme of we try and get a bit now looking to use that budget. Bacteria, you get vegetation, and because of product, some of these for repairing stones. Certainly, there are some of the examples of the parameters to measure there. You can see the spatial resolution of these new sensors is good. So it's good. I'll illustrate some of the data we get. We're going down to work on our lake, about 14 o'clock. 1% of that. So that's my resolution. You can do it with airborne. You can see that down the shoreline does stick out very nicely. Airborne no wire. Remote sensing isn't all about being up in the air. There's also remote sensing using homes, using high sensing. There's some units for mapping macrophones related, mapping noise, volume, then we use similar systems for monitoring fish populations. Yeah. Use this. Yeah. You can sing a song if you want. I do like a bit of karaoke. So, do I need to use this anymore? Should I? Okay. That's good. I don't have to sing. You don't have to suffer. So, they're really sort of. Is that okay? So you can get really good quantitative information. I'm getting lots of echo here. Is it that that's picking it up or something? I don't know. Okay, that sounds better now, yeah. So they're very quick. They all get processed in the US. We don't have to do any processing. We have done a bit of validation work with the vegetation mapping, but they are pretty well validated systems now. And actually lots of anglers use the fishing software and have them on their small boats for mapping. And so you can actually give these to fishermen, and they're going around the lake much more than you are, and it's on their boat and it's mapping all the data for you. So, and we actually have the macrophyte thing now on a fishing boat, or the boat that the fishery own, and then they go around and start doing a lot of the mapping for us, but don't have to do anything apart from turn the machine on when they drive around the boat. And they're quite cheap, actually, systems, relatively, as well. So we do a lot of work at CH on lake buoys. So these are quite large buoy systems. They're about 1 meter, 2 meters across, but they have weather stations on, and they have a number of chemical probes, and the biology is chlorophyll A, temperature profiles, and they are run by solar panels with batteries on the top of the buoy as well. In Scotland, we find that the solar panels aren't sufficient enough, so we have to replace the car batteries every month or two, but generally in summer, we're okay. We also have bought some commercial sensors like cyanotorches, which measures chlorophyll and cyanobacteria. It's really good. And then Mike's, who was supposed to be coming on this trip, is developing a sort of low-cost dissolved oxygen sensor. So it's just taking one of the sensors from that and creating it in a sort of well-waterproof system with a wiper system, a self-cleaning system, so that the sensor itself is commercial at the moment, but all the kit around it isn't, so it keeps the costs down quite a lot. And we can get that so that that data is telemetered to your servers here, or to CEH and then to you, or whatever, probably locally to here using your local mobile network. Be the best thing. Now this isn't our stuff we're doing in CEH, but this is in our sister group, Oceanography Centre. They're really getting down to some fine level, small new sensors, so micro flow cytometry to measure phytoplankton communities in the oceans and bacterial communities, and then some small DNA, RNA sensors, again, targeting particular species that can be monitoring coastal waters quite regularly to look at bathing water quality in coastal waters. And the advantage for them is obviously it reduces delays in warning the public of poor quality waters for swimming, but it also it means a lot less costs of you not having to go out, and particularly some of the ship costs for going into the oceans are very large. And I mean, these aren't quite ready yet, but I think we're probably not that many years off having these sorts of sensors available. And potentially they're lower cost than some of the other big systems because they are quite simplified systems. Citizen science, so we're particularly known in the UK for citizen science, and have done a number of reports for our regulatory agencies to try and incorporate citizen science into their data collection. And so some of the advantages of citizen science is that you engage the public with the work and with the monitoring and the management of the environment. They can be very cost effective, and they improve spatial and temporal coverage. So we've got things like butterfly monitoring, ladybird monitoring, invasive species monitoring is all now done largely by the public. We have a campaign that goes out, create a smartphone app, and it's incredible the amount of data we get from 10,000 people across the country will report on the spread of a new wasp entering the UK, or a rare butterfly or something like that. So it's really excellent for that sort of stuff that captures the public imagination. The sort of questions you have over it are the quality of the data, how you trust that quality, and the bias in recording effort. And our groups at Wallingford have quite a good sort of history of trying to explore and minimize those issues here, or dealing with that in terms of the statistical analysis. And so our group up in Edinburgh, myself particularly, was involved in creating this Blooming Algae app, which is for the public to monitor or tell us where algal blooms are occurring. And that's really, it's not a fancy sensor or anything, it's literally take a photo of the bloom, send it to us, it gives us the location, it tells us what activities are going on, whether it's swimming, water sports, whether people are walking their dogs, whether there's cattle drinking from the water. And then we verify that based on the photo. If the photo's not good enough, we don't necessarily can't confirm it. But we can have a communication with the person about their record. They can go and take another photo, or it engages them just in terms of reporting and monitoring the environment. We have set this up so we get immediate text alerts go through to some of our environment agencies and our health departments, who put up warning signs if it's a confirmed bloom issue. So we have lots of people who walk their pet dogs in the UK who don't maybe have that. And we have quite a few dog deaths each year from cyanobacteria. And so dog walkers and vets are particularly involved in using this app. That we targeted it through Twitter and social media at particular groups, people who go swimming in lakes and things like that. So, and the take-up has been better there than just not necessarily general public. And that data can go into data portals and dashboards. We have a specific data site for this app. It doesn't yet go into the Lakes portal, but that's something we're thinking about. And we're hopefully putting it onto our sort of National Health Service data portals. Each local authority, local regional council, has a environmental health department, and they have a sort of website and warning system for the public and things. And so we're talking about getting it onto their system. But similarly, you could have it as part of your dashboard here. But we also use just pen and paper a lot for citizen monitoring. So particularly with fishermen, we do that at Loch Leven. Every fisherman that goes out has to take this small slip of paper and record the lengths of fish he catches, ideally the weight and whether he keeps that fish and how long they've been fishing. So we can actually get an estimate of catch per unit effort and look at the health of the fishery over time. We've got that for about 40 years of data now, so we've got a good data set of how healthy the fishery is. But again, that's something you can do, I think, potentially with fishing communities. And this was a nice community mapping system in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, where it's actually health workers and students from the university who went out and mapped flooding and sanitation infrastructure, and looking at where that flooding was causing health problems in Dar es Salaam. But again, it was not general public, but it was more specialist health workers that were doing the community mapping. So I guess what we're wanting to do now is thinking about how we integrate all this information, because each one of them has advantages and disadvantages, and so it's trying to get a fully integrated picture from all four. And that's the sort of theme of a proposal that we're developing with ATREE for some UK funding at the moment. And we have been shortlisted, so we're keeping our fingers crossed, but it's a very large project, and it will particularly focus on satellites and citizen data, but trying to integrate that with sort of traditional monitoring of the Pollution Control Board or those sorts of people. Okay, and this is just a sort of flow model for that project, actually. So collating data through citizens, through Earth observation, through sensors, also collating social data as well as environmental data, and then having a sort of analysis and modeling package of work and producing sort of data products that can help decision making at the local level, but also particularly for sharing information upstream and downstream, so people upstream or downstream are aware of the implications of their management decisions. And then that decision, after the decision making, actually implementing the solutions there. And whether those solutions could be social solutions, how people behave, how they use water, or they could be technical solutions. And what we're trying to probably focus on is less on technical solutions, but more on nature-based solutions like wetlands or social solutions that we think potentially have more power in a way and more cost-effective. And that's GCRF involved. We've also got a new PhD student funded by the Scottish Government, and that's going to be working with Durba. I don't know if Durba's here actually, but she's not. But we have a PhD student who will be coming to ATREE for at least 1 month for the next 3 years or so to sort of work on the Bangalore lakes here. That's it.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I've got one question here.
Where?
Just here.
Okay. Interesting to see the Sentinel usage in the air quality. It's a good thing. It's available from 2015.
From Sentinel 2 and 3, it depends on the Sentinels. There was a Sentinel 1 that went up earlier, I think.
But the optical resolution is not that good as Sentinel 2. Yeah.
Sentinel 2, yeah, it hasn't got so many spectral bands.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question is like, this is fine if you use Sentinel from 2015, but if you go back, maybe to the 1400, so how will they using Landsat will make a data?
So before that, we've got MERIS satellite data, and that was MERIS, and that was multispectral as well, and that has similar spectral bands to the Sentinel. And so when we got the funding for the project, MERIS was still in the sky. And on the day we had the interview for the project, it stopped working. And it was like, no. But fortunately, they funded the project. And so there is now this gap between MERIS and Sentinel. But we're hoping the algorithms have been developed on MERIS, and we're testing whether they're applicable to the Sentinel data and work, or whether there is any need. But they're the same spectral bands, so they should be more or less the same.
Is having all the vegetation patterns what we are having in Sentinel?
Sorry?
The radius patterns what we are having in Sentinel, is it there in MERIS?
I think they're pretty much the same bands. I don't know for precise details.
This is something new to me, because I thought only in Habitat and Sentinel having the radius bands for vegetation or this kind of analysis.
Yeah, so it's much better for chlorophyll and for vegetation. So they're not designed really for inland waters. It's okay for oceans, but they're not designed well for different algal groups. So cyanobacteria, we're finding it's not working. It can pick up cyanobacteria, but if you've got other algae there that have a similar absorbance, then you get problems. But for chlorophyll A, it works pretty well. So it works quite well for chlorophyll A. Yeah.
So maybe I'll ask you a question.
So in your presentation, you mentioned that to monitor water quality, like whether it's good, bad, or moderate, you have a baseline data from a pristine lake, right? So now in Bangalore, we have these irrigation tanks, which were now we call them lakes, but historically they were irrigation tanks.
Yeah.
Now for these surface water bodies, how we decide upon, first of all, how we create a baseline, because there is no as such a pristine lake or pristine irrigation tank. And then how, because this is the problem which is being faced by a lake dashboard, because if you have to display the data, you need to tell whether it's good, bad, or worse water quality, but then with what you compare it with, that's the real question. So what are your suggestions on that?
So I think you're living in it's a different system here for you